I'm technical director and MENA transport planning leader for a company called AURECON. So today's my presentation is very much focused towards sustainable traffic and transport planning in the Middle East context. We all know that Middle East is different to the Western world. We have got different challenges in Middle East compared to the Western world, and this is what this whole presentation has been structured to highlight. What are the challenges in the Middle East and how do we achieve the sustainable and smart planning in Middle East in next 10 to 15 years time. Okay, so the content of my presentation is structured in 4 themes. The first theme is I just want to introduce about who we are so that you can put things in context, what we really do and why we are talking about sustainable transport in Dubai and Middle East today. Then we'll talk about challenges in terms of sustainable transport planning in Middle East. And then finally, we all know that Dubai has got a vision of reaching 30% public transport by 2030. I mean, that vision has been shared by the leadership. So what measures are being taken to achieve those vision? And for the last theme of my presentation would be, is 30% really enough in terms of sustainable planning? Because Western world, we are talking about public transport share of 60 to 70%. And in Dubai, if we reach 30%, would it be enough in terms of carbon emission? Would it be enough in terms of the environmental impact or not? So this is what will be covered in this presentation today. So before we start the presentation, I just want to introduce who we are so that you can understand really why we are talking today and you can put us in context. AURECON is a multidisciplinary company which provides, obviously I understand this is not a marketing platform, but still it's very important to let you guys know exactly who we are. So AURECON is a multidisciplinary company which provides services in engineering and planning platforms. In terms of transport planning, currently we are doing SPD 025 project. This project we are working with Road and Transport Authority of Dubai. The project is all about developing future transport strategy for Dubai for 2020 and 2030 scenarios. And we are developing the transport model, an integrated multimodal model for Dubai, which will be used for the future planning purposes. So this is all going in for RTA. And just to rewind back, I mean the first transport strategy for Dubai was developed back in 2002. Again, AURECON developed that strategy for Road and Transport Authority. That strategy was called R1000 Transport Strategy for Dubai. We are also doing a project called RTA Transport Impact Study Manual. Basically, we are developing a manual which will be used by various developers, various consultants and various users to do the traffic impact study or transport impact study, so that whenever a land use developer comes in and he has to develop some land use in any part of the Dubai, he would know exactly that how he study the impact of that particular development in terms of transport and how do they mitigate it. We also developed Dubai Expo 2020 Transport Master Plan, which is something which we did for Road and Transport Authority back 6 months back. And we are also involved with major developers in the region. We are doing the transport master plan for the Dubai Creek Harbour development. I'm sure you guys must have about, sorry, I'm not sure why this is not moving yet. Okay, I wasn't sure that the slide is not really reflecting what I'm speaking to. So SPD 025 is all about developing Dubai's future strategy for 2020-2030 scenario. We are also developing the transport model for Dubai. Transport Impact Study Manual, this is another project which we are developing for RTA, which will give us guidance about how to do transport impact study when we are doing the new developments in Dubai. We did Dubai Expo 2020 Transport Master Plan for RTA, which was completed almost 6 months back. As I mentioned, that we are also heavily involved with the private developers, particularly the mega developers in the region. We are involved with MR Properties. We are doing the transport master plan for Dubai Creek Harbour development in Dubai. We are also doing all the traffic planning and transport planning work for Burj Khalifa downtown Dubai Mall, Opera District, Burj Khalifa Tower. We are also doing the transport master plan and traffic study for Jumeirah Lake Tower and the new Burj 2020 Tower. And the reason why I'm telling you all these things, because our presence in this region is for more than 15 years, and we developed the first transport strategy for Dubai, and for last 15 years we have been contributing in terms of transport planning and sustainable planning. That's why it's very important that I express this project which we have contributed in this region, and we know exactly what the challenges which we have in this region and how these challenges could be mitigated in the future scenarios. Let's talk about the definition of sustainable transport or sustainable planning. I think when I go to people from different profession, each and every profession, they have got their own definition of smart or sustainable planning. As transport planner, my definition of sustainable transport is to provide transport which is environmentally, socially and climate-wise sustainable. When I say socially sustainable means it provides communities, it provides connectivity and integrity between the communities, movements for pedestrians, movement for cyclists, safe environment. When I say environmental and climate impact, I'm talking about more about reduce carbon emissions and reduce SO and NO emissions, which is more about the emission side. My definition of sustainability is something you have to plan so that you can provide space for all users without impacting the natural environment, without impacting the environment around you. Okay. Then let's see the challenges. I mean, in the last 15 years, as I mentioned, we have been working on many projects with local authorities, with developers. We have identified some key challenges, and particularly since we are doing the current transport model for Dubai, we did household surveys, roadside interview surveys, we did the utilities surveys. During the surveys, we observed that it is really very difficult in Middle East to achieve this public transport share, which has been put together as a vision of the high leadership. One of the biggest challenge which we have seen is the car ownership in Dubai, particularly not on Dubai only, it's Middle East as well. The reason, if you take Dubai as an example, the car ownership of Dubai is very high compared to the European world, and one of the biggest reason which we observed during the ground surveys was the population segmentation. The population segmentation of Dubai is very different to the Western world. Western world, they have got the average household size of 4.5 to 5 people in a household. Here your average household is only 2.1 or 2.2, and the reason is because there is a lot of influence of the expats, there are a lot of influence of the bachelors living in this region, which really creates low household sizes, and each and every household has got their own car, which means the car ownership dictates on a higher side. Climate, obviously there is no question about the climate. Climate in Middle East is more on a hotter side. During the month of July and August, the temperature rises all the way almost about 50 degrees Celsius, if not 50, 48 to 50 in that particular range. Fuel prices, reserve of oil in the world. Okay, and when this reserve of oil is combined together with the non-tax policy of Middle East, the fuel prices over here are much cheaper than the Western world. Then the supply itself, the public transport supply of Middle East is not really very extensive. Dubai has already initiated in terms of public transport supply. But even Dubai has not really achieved the full vision which it was expected to be achieved. Currently, only 75 kilometers of the total metro network has been developed. The total proposed network of Dubai is in the range of 400 kilometers plus, but only 20% of that developed, 80% is still to be developed. So that's also very challenging. I mean, you cannot really push people by putting policies to use public transport if there is no supply. So supply is also something which is very influential in this region. Dubai is 30%. If you pick other cities, they are much lesser than that. Some of the Middle East cities even don't have any proper metro public transport system. High trip length. Again, this is something which we observed during the ground surveys which we did during the transport model development of Dubai. The trip lengths in Dubai are very high compared to the Western world, and the reason is the land use planning. Dubai is more about planned in a linear or in a different fashion. Obviously, all your residential communities are located in the northern side of Dubai. Sharjah has got a major impact in terms of traffic coming to Dubai. So if you see Sharjah on one side and Jebel Ali and the offices on the other side, so the trip lengths which are triggered in Dubai are much higher compared to the Western world, where you have got communities, mixed communities, where you have got offices and residential, everything sitting within a single community. So that also dictates the high trip length. So I'm just going through the one by one. For example, if I pick the first challenge, car ownership. Car ownership of Dubai is in the range of about 600 cars per 1,000 people. When you compare with the European world, they have got an average of about 450 cars per 1,000 people. So you can clearly see we are almost about 50% more in terms of car ownership. And also the number of cars in Middle East, they are growing significantly. The growth rate of the Western world is only 2 to 3%, while Middle East, the car growth rate percentage is 6.5% per annum. So obviously you can see that numbers of cars are growing. Currently there are about 1.4 million cars in Dubai, registered in Dubai, and total population is in the range of 2.3 million, and it is expected in next 5-6 years we'll have about 2 million cars for about 3 million people. So your number of cars are really going significantly high. And I've put a cutout over here which says that Dubai has double the cars than London. Obviously it gets you some feel, and also the usability of these cars. I mean, if you see 450 cars in Europe per 1,000 people, these people, they own the car, but that doesn't necessarily mean they use the car during the peak hour. But in Dubai, if 600 people are owning the car, most of the people, those who own the car in Middle East, they use it during the trip. So that's a different scenario that also adds in terms of congestion, that also adds in terms of traffic, that also adds in terms of the emission. Fuel price, I mean, everyone says, whenever I go to Western world, they say, yeah, fuel per liter is cheaper than water per liter. I mean, I just bought a water bottle over here, which was 5 dirham, and I can easily get 3 liters of petrol in that, and that was only half a liter bottle, by the way. So in 5 dirham, you get half a liter of water, and 5 dirham, I can get 3 liters of petrol. So you can clearly see the distinction between where we are going. So, and the reason which I mentioned earlier is more about the largest reserve. Obviously the oil is available in abundance, and also the non-taxes. So if you see the Western world, Middle East, the average price per liter is about 1.7 dirham, but if you see Western world, you are talking about 4.6 liters. So obviously all these things totally add together in a holistic view, is adding more in terms of private transport. Let's talk about the climate. In Middle East, the walkability scenario is very limited, since the weather during the month of July and August goes significantly high, 50 degrees Celsius. The walkability perception in Middle East is people are not willing to walk more than 500 meters. If you force them, whatever you want to do, people cannot really walk more than 500 meters. But if you see the walkability in the Western world, the walkability is in the range of 1500 meters. So we are almost 1/3 in terms of walkability of this particular regions. And obviously, if you don't have a proper walkable environment, people are not going to use public transport. You cannot really connect public transport to everyone's house, so they have to walk some distances, which is there everywhere in the world. But in Middle East, it's a bit different. People really don't tend to walk more. They want to limit the walking distance because of the climate impact. Okay, then high trip lengths. This is again coming back from the land use planning and the way the Middle East is structured. As I mentioned earlier, the Middle East, particularly Dubai, is completely located along the coast. It's a linear fashion. The spatial distribution, the land use spatial distribution of Middle East, completely spatial. You have got residential communities sitting in the northern side, offices sitting in the southern side. So average trip length, as I mentioned, is about 14 kilometers in Dubai now, and it takes about 35 minutes to travel or complete the trips during the peak period. And if you convert them in terms of speed, then average speed you'll get about 25 kph. It's not really an ideal scenario when you have got the roads like Sheikh Zayed Road, Mohammed bin Zayed, and all these roads, 120 kph, 100 kph road. However, the actual speed which you get in this particular city is only 25 kph. So you can clearly see the distinction that how much congested or what kind of extension, what extent of congestion is observed on these roads during the peak hour. Sharjah impact is very important. We cannot really ignore the Sharjah impact. Sharjah so significantly number of trips in Dubai, and these trips adds a lot in terms of trip lengths, because they travel from the northern emirate and go all the way to the southern side of the Dubai, which is in Jebel Ali areas and all these developments. Okay. Then public transport supply. Dubai is maybe a bit different to the other cities of Middle East, but it's not that different when you compare it with the Western world. Middle East currently has got a public transport share of about 15%, and I have put a cutout over here which says that 16% of Dubai's residents will use public transport by the end of this year. So let's say 16% now. So if you compare this 15-16% with the Western world, London has got 60% PUT share, Paris 62%, New York 67%. Okay, so obviously we are nowhere there now. I mean, it's a developing scenario. It's gonna take time before we reach to a level of public transport supply, to the level of the modal share which these Western world have. So it will take time. A lot of people say that yeah, Middle East, Dubai is more like America, it's more like US. No, it's not like US. You have got New York sitting over there. New York have got 67% public transport. So Middle East is different. So let's treat Middle East in a different way. Let's not try to combine Middle East cities and Dubai and try to compare them with the Western world. It will take time. You will never reach, I'm not saying never, but in the next 15 years, as I mentioned, that Dubai's vision is to go 30%, but there is no vision which takes you to the 70% or 67%. And also it's very difficult. Other challenges which I mentioned earlier, car ownership, fuel and all those things. The challenges with respect to the policies are also very difficult in this region. For example, when for the first time these Salik routes were implemented in Dubai back in 2007-2008, it was expected that once the Saliks are implemented, people will shift to the public transport supply, but that really didn't happen. I mean, what people started doing it, instead of moving to the public transport, they started changing the routes. The whole objective of Salik is not to make money. It's not to make people change the route. The whole objective of Salik is for the people to shift from private transport to public transport. That didn't really work well, and the reason is because of the public transport supply. And now with the improved supply which will come in next 10 to 15 years time, obviously this goal which has been declared and which has been already put in a vision by higher leadership will be achieved. That means by 2030 we should have about 30% public transport share in Dubai in particular, and maybe other cities are also working towards a vision of 30%, so they will also achieve 30%, if not 30% in particular in that range by 2030 scenarios. So how do we reach 30%? So what Dubai and what other Middle East cities are doing to reach this 30%? It's a good lesson learned now from the Western world. It's a good lesson learned now from all the implementation which have happened in the past, that policies alone cannot really help you in getting the required modal share. Infrastructure also will not help you in achieving the required infrastructure share. It has to be an integrated approach where you put infrastructure and also put penalties in terms of private transport so that people can move on public transport systems. So there's a lot of work. New infrastructure is going to come in Dubai, in the Middle East in next 10 to 15 years time, which will help people to at least get an alternative to the private transport, and they will be supported by policies. Because if you don't put policies, obviously these days with the comfort level which we have, I mean, if you ask me, if I'm not penalized, it will be very difficult for me to go to the public transport system. So they work in hand, and if they work in hand, they have to go hand in hand as well. So in terms of infrastructure, what Middle East, what particularly I put in Dubai as an example, what Dubai is doing. Dubai has got a current metro network of about 75 kilometers now. In 2030, this metro network will be expanded to about 421 kilometers. So as I mentioned earlier, that Dubai is only 20% developed in terms of metro, so 80% more will be added at the top of that. So not only we have red and green line, you will have purple line, blue line and pink line coming up in the future, extension of green line, extension of red line, all these lines will be adding up in the future. But metro alone cannot really serve because metro can never provide door-to-door connectivity. So it will be supported by a feeder bus master plan, a feeder bus system for Dubai. Currently we have got about 1500 buses in Dubai. This will be expanded further in the future with future additional buses, with bus lanes. The bus lanes you might have already seen in the CBD area. There are more bus lanes coming in. There are proposals of having the PRTs in Dubai. Then there is also proposal of having more tram network in Dubai. So this is rail and buses. Also, public transport agency of Road and Transport Authority, they have got the marine department included, recently included within their agency. So Marine Department has also developed a Marine Master Plan of Dubai. Marine Master Plan is to more promote the marine public transport connectivity in Dubai. So there is an opportunity. If you see the fashion, the spatial distribution of Dubai in north-south, and also there is a sea running in the north-south direction. So it is proposed to have the future coastal network, so from all the way from Sharjah or Mamzar to Jabal Ali, there will be a future marine network which will cover the coastal high-speed ferry kind of network, and then also the new canal which has been recently opened will have its own internal network, which will not be high-speed ferry. It will be more kind of upper environment with a low profile and more leisure and tourist oriented. So if you combine this together, it becomes a comprehensive infrastructure supply which is going to happen in next 10 to 15 years time in Dubai. Okay, then this infrastructure alone cannot really put you in terms of public transport supply of 30%, which is required in next 10 to 15 years. It has to be supplemented, it has to be supported by the policies. If you don't have policies, it's very difficult to move people on the public transport. The policies which are being investigated, which some of them are already implemented on the side, road tolling, Salik, we all know that Sheikh Zayed has got a Salik toll. Salik really will add some benefits in terms of moving the private transport to public transport once this supply is implemented. Now you don't really see enough benefit of Salik, but once we'll have more public transport, once we'll have better connectivity in terms of metro, then this Salik and the future Salik locations, so whatever Road and Transport Authority plans for, will add up in terms of boosting the public transport supply of Dubai. Then in terms of road tolling, you'll have congestion pricings in the CBD area. You can also have things like cordon tolling. So in certain areas which are very congested, for example, if you take a downtown area which is very congested during the peak hour, you can put a cordon tolling over there. So these tolls will help in boosting the public transport share. Then parking management is something which is an essential part of policies for Dubai, for Middle East as well. Parking management and planning is more about where to provide parking, how much parking should be provided, and what kind of pricing has to be put on the price. Because parking price in the areas where we have got more parking price, for example, if you take this area as an example, this World Trade Center, I have left my car and we have not used, my colleagues, we have not used the car because we said if you go over there we have to pay 50 dirhams an hour for the car parks. It's difficult to get the park. So these kind of things will also help us in achieving the public transport share which is required. And also things like how much parking to be provided. I mean, if you keep on providing the parking areas around the metro stations, obviously no one is going to move to the public transport. So the new development around the metro station, which are more transit oriented developments, there is a requirement of putting more policies on those developments so that you don't really provide full parking requirement as per the authorities standard. Maybe cut the parking requirements for them so they don't really have much parking, and then the residents and the people using those buildings or towers or development, they can use public transport. Staggered working hours is also one of the policy which has been investigated. As AURECON, we did the study of staggered school hours back in 2009 for Roads and Transport Authority. So these kind of policies will help in spreading the peak hour, so that when the peak hour spread, more flexibility for the people to use different modes of transport. Carpooling services already exist in Dubai. It was surprised to me when one of my colleagues told me there is an application called Sharekni, which already exists. And if you go on this application, this is an application developed by Road and Transport Authority. This application provides you full flexibility of opening an account, choosing your route, and asking for the carpooling. So these kind of initiatives have been incorporated in the plans, and they will help in achieving this 30% public transport which is required for the future. Park and ride facilities. Currently we have got 2 park and rides in Dubai, one in the Sharia and one in Akil. There are initiatives to put more park and rides in Dubai so that people can park within close to their, because walkability, as I mentioned earlier, is very challenging in this region. So at least people can walk to the nearest they can drive their car to the nearest metro station, park their cars, and then take the metro or public transport system. And awards and initiatives are also very critical and very important, because these kind of things are more about putting motivation within the system. And Dubai Sustainability Award, which is announced every year, is one of the example which is being considered for the future. But now the question which I want to ask over here is let's assume that all of this will be done. Not assume, obviously it's being done. So let's say by 2030 we will have 30% public transport in Dubai. But is 30% enough? I mean, in 15 years from now, do you think in terms of sustainability planning, in terms of emission requirement, is this really enough? And how do we go beyond it? Because the first slide shows that New York has got 67% public transport, Paris has got 62, London has got 60. So if we reach 30%, by that time the Western world will have a different technology and different things. So is that really enough? And how do we go to the next mile? And this is what I want to present another scenario which we are calling Smart Solution 30 Plus. That means we don't limit ourselves to the 30% public transport vision which Dubai and the region has. Let's think of a way where we can push ourselves beyond the miles. So the Smart Solution package which we have put together, it's a combination of several capsules. It's like the first one is land use planning, and again as triggered from one of my slides, Dubai has got a very high average trip length, 14 kilometer, and if there is no control with the future growth of Dubai, this trip length is going to go significantly higher in the future. So land use planning and integration of land use and transport is going to be a key element for the future optimization of average trip lengths, which is important. Then integrated network planning, there is a requirement of having a multimodal network planning. I'll go through all of these capsules one by one, but I'm just putting these things in the context. The integrated network planning is also important, and integrated network planning is more about, I don't want to just focus on public transport network. There is also a requirement of enhancing and optimizing the private transport network, which should be, because I have spoken to the expert. I was in one of the presentations of sustainable transport in London this year, and one of the criticism which I heard from the guys over there, that whenever we talk about sustainability, everyone says public transport, public transport, public transport, but I have not seen a presentation which says sustainability and how do we optimize private transport. So this was a message which I got from that debate or from that particular conference, and I'm trying to put that message into this presentation as well. So integrated network planning, which means not only public transport, we have to focus a bit more in terms of how do we plan our private transport, how do we plan our road networks, development, access and parking planning. You will see that people, those who go in Dubai Mall during the weekends, you'll see that there's a lot of spillback from Dubai Mall which kills the whole Sheikh Zayed road. Okay, so if you optimize these kind of things, obviously it will help in relieving the congestion and helping and boosting the emissions, basically reducing the emissions, boosting the sustainability by reducing the emissions. ITS is also very important. Future technologies will be the key, they will play the key roles. We have seen in the past 200 years back, early 19th century, when these motor vehicles were announced, obviously no one knew that the whole world is moving from the animal car to the motor vehicles, and when it happened, the infrastructure requirement was very different, and it brought a disruption to the whole system, and it added value now. We are driving the motor cars. 200 years back, no one really knew what these motor cars means. Everyone was riding those animal cars. Future transport models, those who comes from the transport planning and transport modeling background would understand that how transport models can really help us in putting different planning scenarios and testing different options, and how we can use the transport model as a tool in terms of sustainable planning. Sustainable material is also very important when we are doing road construction or any kind of constructions in Dubai or in anywhere else. It's very important to consider the sustainable and recycled materials so that we can use them in terms of sustainable planning, which can contribute to the sustainability. And awareness is the last one. Without awareness, no initiative can be taken if people are not really aware of what these emissions and what the impact of these emissions would mean. So before I go into these capsules, I just want to explain the basic equation. The basic equation as transport planner for me is environmental emissions. They are somehow directly correlated with the vehicle hours or vehicle kilometer travel on a network. And vehicle hours or vehicle kilometers travel on the network is a multiplication of numbers of vehicular trips and time and distance traveled by a single trip. Okay, so if you see what public transport does, public transport simply reduces the number of vehicular trips. So say 30% public transport share will be achieved by 2030. So number of vehicular trips on the road will be reduced by 30%. But there's also another component which is very important, that the length of the trip, the distance of the trip, and the time taken by that trip. Okay, there is enough room to optimize that, and with the smart solution, if we can work in this particular area by optimizing the length and the travel time and the congestion of those particular trips, that can really help us significantly in reducing the environmental emissions, which can help in adding the contribution to the sustainability. So on the right hand side of the slide, you can see this is what Dubai looks like now in terms of population density per hectare, and this is how it will look like in 2020, and this is how it will look like 2030 in terms of population and density. So now the biggest question is here is you can clearly see Dubai is going to further go in the southern direction. There are a lot of development like Dubai South and World Trade Center, Dubai World Central and Techno Park and all this development coming in the southern side of Dubai. And average trip length of Dubai currently is 14 kilometers. If this trend keeps on continuing, and based on our estimation, the average trip length of Dubai will go more than 22 kilometers by 2030 scenario once we have all these developments in. Okay, so how we can optimize it? I mean, obviously that will not be a favorable scenario for sustainability, because once if you remember the equation which I showed it to you, emissions are directly related to the number of vehicular trips multiplied by the vehicle kilometers or the trip length. So if Dubai keeps on going in this direction, the length of the trips will go significantly high. And how do we optimize it? And for that optimization, there is significant room for Dubai and the other cities in the region to optimize the land use planning scenarios. One of the initiatives which could be taken forward is developing a good mix of land uses. So we don't really put residential on one side and offices and commercial on the other side. We should think more about mixed kind of land uses where you have residential, offices and tourism and everything as a one community, so that people don't have to really travel outside the community. Affordable housing is really going to play a very important role in the future of Dubai, because a lot of people from lower middle to the lower income group, they prefer to stay in northern Emirates like Sharjah and Ajman, and which is contributing to the high trip lengths. Once we bring them back into Dubai's environmental by having affordable housing within each and every community, obviously it will bring people back from these Emirates into the system, and it will help in the internalization and reducing the reducing the length of the trips. So overall, a message over here is that there is significant room for land use and transport integration. There is significant room for optimization of the land use, and from this slide you can clearly see that Dubai 2.3 now, which has to grow to 5.5 or 5.7 million residents in 2030. So we are only 40% developed. 60% of the development still has to come. So there is a room for bringing that planning element come in, and if that planning elements come in, the trip length, which is supposed to go to 22 kilometers, can be brought down by at least 20%. So we can optimize the trip length growth from 14 not to 22 only. We can limit it to about 17 to 18 kilometers by doing a good land use planning. Then we are talking about integrated network planning. And integrated network planning, again, I mean, I just don't want to focus only on public transport network. There is significant room which can be added for the planning of good roads. If you see the split of the vehicle kilometer, 45% of travel in Dubai happens on the local roads, okay, and 55% happens on the strategic roads like Sheikh Zayed and Mohammed bin Zayed and Emirates Road. So this 45% has significant room for improvement. Okay, obviously you don't really have to do major corridors or major roads. The optimization of the local road network can be done by doing small measures like getting rid of the dead ends, putting a better connectivity between the community. For example, if there is a community on one side of the Sheikh Zayed Road and there is community on the other side of the Sheikh Road, if you provide a direct connection between the two communities, then people don't have to travel on the Sheikh Zayed Road and take a strategic road network to go to the other community. So connectivity is a very important or challenging scenario which needs to be considered for optimization of the network planning for the particularly in terms of local environment. Also, for all local and collector kind of road network, there is a requirement of integration of pedestrian and cyclist network, because once you have that network, it will promote the public transport share. Then we also need to create a lot of door-to-door integration. So, I mean, not metros, I'm not talking about the bigger public transport thing, but integration within the community, so that once someone come out of the metro station, he can get a feeder bus, or he can get a tram, or he can get a BRT, so that he can go to his door. A lot of developers are doing that. I mean, we are working with Miras on Blue Water development. They are doing a BRT and GRT kind of system. So they are connecting their development directly from the metro station to a PRT, which is personal rapid transit kind of system. Dubai Mall, we did the Burj Khalifa Transport Master Plan back in 2006. At that time, we suggested to have this direct connection from the metro station to the Dubai Mall, which is this pedestrian connection, which is really helping a lot. We can clearly see that. So this integration are very important, and this integration doesn't have to be on a strategic nature. I mean, I'm not saying that everything cannot be sorted out on a strategic network. You can have 1,000 kilometers of public transport network, but still not the 30% public transport share. For getting 30% public transport share, we need to think more about integrated network planning and better connectivity, so that we can connect our communities properly with the network, and which is also a very important element out of this presentation. Then development of access and parking planning. I took an example of Dubai Mall, and I personally am working on Dubai Mall traffic impact study for last 4 years, and I have seen the challenges which we had to face on Dubai Mall. Dubai Mall, everyone knows, during the weekend the spillback comes to the sheikhs, though there's a lot of congestion, there's a lot of things which do happen. So to avoid these kind of things in the future, we really need to have move a bit forward, so that all the new developments which were coming in, there is a requirement of a better access and parking planning. When we say better access and parking planning, we have to think of the smart solutions. Parking management system is definitely one of them. Advanced information size, integration of parking and road stall system. This was a suggestion which was suggested, is still not materialized, but if this suggestion is materialized, it will really boost the integration of the parking. The suggestion was that Dubai is using these Salik tolls. Okay, why don't we integrate this Salik with the parking entry fees and all these things, so people don't have to really stop there, so it becomes one comprehensive system. But the question is more about the organization and institutional setup, more about the stakeholder engagement, how it is coordinated. But these kind of things can boost the optimization of the parking. Obviously, there is a lot of requirement because now what really happens is parking designs and parking access planning are done by architects. So sometimes these really needs to go to a professional parking consultant, so that he can review and do all this kind of internal circulation review. He can check the number of gates, and then we also need to. I think I saw in the agenda someone is presenting about the micro simulation model during this afternoon. But I think micro simulation model are very, very, very essential tools for planning of parking as well. Because I have got a video over here which I quickly want to show is. There are basically two videos. So this is a new mall which we are studying for MR on the Salkhor Road. So on the top side you can clearly see the number of lanes and the parking entry experience which was provided originally by the designer when we modeled it, when we used the tool. You can see the major queues being formed on the Salkhor Road, and then we optimize that by putting a smart solution, by integrating it with the fuel system, and by also optimizing the number of barriers and all these things. Then you can clearly see the implications of that on the strategic network. Is a reduced congestion. So what I'm trying to say over here is it looks a small thing, okay, that it's one parking, but one parking issue can have hundreds of millions of additional vehicle hours per year, because these issues are really big and they are very, very significant when you combine them together as an aggregate picture, which are not really in favor to the sustainable planning. Future technologies, as I mentioned earlier, that 200 years back when animal carts were move to the motor vehicles. That was considered as a disruptive technology. People say this is the disruptive technology. I don't want to call it disruptive technology. All the future technologies, some of them are not future anymore, because electric cars has been there for last 10-15 years. Tesla has been producing electric car for last 15 years. Europe has got about 2.3 million registered electric cars, and if you see, Europe, the world has got about 2.3 million registered electric car, and 1.5 million is between Europe, China, and US. So there is a room of bringing that particular element in Middle East, in Dubai, so that we can optimize the sustainability, we can reduce the emissions. Driverless car, very fancy thing. Every day we read on the newspaper, driverless car. There's at least 2 or 3 pilot runs which have happened in Dubai in the past. The recent was in Burj Khalifa downtown on MR Boulevard almost 2 months back. And you must have heard about His Excellency's vision of having 25% of the Dubai's transportation to be driverless by 2030. So these kind of initiatives are really going to contribute in a lot in terms of carbon emissions reduction and in terms of contribution to the sustainability. Hyperloop is another example. I think Hyperloop team has already arrived in Dubai. There is a 20-kilometer prototype project which they are developing for Dubai. They already have signed an agreement with PP World back in August 2016, where they have agreed to come up with a model which will help PP World to move containers from the port to the other side. So these things are happening. So these all things are going to help in terms of reducing the congestion, in terms of reducing the emissions and helping and contributing towards the sustainability. ITS is also very important. Most of these things are already existing, but there is a room for optimization of that. Multimodal control and command center. Most of the command center which exists now is a metro command center. There is a traffic command center, but there is a need of having a multimodal controls of command center which controls all the mode of transport, whether they act on public transport, whether they are on private transport, whether they are on pedestrian or cycling or whatever it is. There is a need for that. That command center needs to be established. Demand responsive public transport service. We already have a demand responsive taxi services. Now you can always call a taxi and say we need a taxi. So there is a requirement of having a demand responsive public transport service. Scoot exists in Middle East. There are a lot of places. MR Boulevard already has a fully integrated Scoot system where all these signals are fully coordinated, so that during the peak hour, during the off-peak hour, the signal timing keeps on changing, and it really helps in relieving the congestion. Journey planner system, variable message, dynamic navigation system. This is something which one of my colleagues suggested, and it's a very important thing. I mean, we have a navigation system which we use now. Google Maps we use is more often, Apple Maps and all these things, but they are not really dynamic, they are not really live. There is a lag of about 10 minutes to 15 minutes between what Google would show and what the real scenario is. So there is a need of dynamic navigation system. I think I heard there is a company working on a satellite navigation system which will help in the navigation of it. One trip information. Am I running out of time, by the way? Yep. Am I within the time? Okay. Just let me know if I'm running out. I'm almost about to be done. Okay, it's fine, Shoka. Okay, the future transport models. Future transport models are very important. We have a transport model for Dubai. The first transport model was developed again by our company AURECON back in 2002. We are redeveloping the new model for Dubai. A lot of other cities, the big cities, they have got a transport model. Jeddah, we are updating the Jeddah's transport model. Qatar, Doha, they have got a transport model. But these transport models are very important. We should not only limit them to the major cities. There's a requirement of having these kind of transport model for each and every cities. And the reason is that these transport models are based on data and fact, because they don't really come out on experience. They don't really come out from internet search. They don't come out from the desktop thing. These models are developed based on the ground surveys. I mean, when we did the Dubai model, we are still doing, by the way, we are still developing it. We did almost interviews for about 25,000 household interviews, which we did. We did roadside interviews, we did offices interviews. So all that information help us in understanding the travel characteristic of Dubai. Okay, And now we are using that particular traffic characteristic. We also, during the model development, we also ask them question which I think transport modelers will understand, which is the stated preference survey. We ask them that if we give you a choice of public transport, will you be using public transport if we give you this incentive, or if we give that incentive? Or that stated preference survey information has also gone into the model development. So these models are very important because you can always use this model for understanding the future traffic flow, future public transport flow patterns in the region, which can help us in developing the multimodal scenarios. And one of the good things which we have recently done in the new model, in this new transport model which we are developing for Dubai, we have integrated an environmental module. So every time a consultant or a developer will be using this model, if he is trying to put a new land use, if he wants to put a new road network, if he wants to put a new metro, he will know the impact of that particular scheme in terms of environmental emissions. He can always measure it, that what this particular scheme do in terms of environment. And also there is a requirement, I mean, we cannot really do models and then wait for 10 years and say we'll do the model after 10 years. There is particular requirement of updating this model every 2 or 3 years, because Middle East, as I mentioned, is very dynamic. The cities are growing in a very fast, the growth rate is about 4 to 5%, so 5% is significantly high. And with these new people coming in, the travel characteristics will keep on changing, so there is a requirement of updating this model on a regular basis. Okay. And then sustainable material. Guys, you must have heard about this E12 green road. AURECON did the concept design for this road for Department of Transport. Abu Dhabi, we did that concept design. This is a unique concept. This is a 5-kilometer corridor which is being built as an extension of E12, the Yes Road, from E11, the main Dubai Abu Dhabi road, to E311. It's a 5-kilometer, and this road will be built based on all the recyclable materials. So the material which is being used for construction of this road is recyclable. The lighting is not going to happen from the electric source. The lighting of this is going to happen from the solar energy. Solar energy will be used for cycling. And there's a image you can see a lot of other aspects which have been incorporated, natural environment and natural slopes, and there are a lot of things which has gone into this particular thing. So which will be a pilot project. I think I read it last week only that this scheme is going out for construction. So in about 2 years time we'll have this road constructed, so which will give us an experience about what exactly the impact and what exactly the benefit we get out of this sustainable material using in a sustainable kind of environment. Mazda PRT is also one of the examples where they did that as a pilot project, which has been popularly reflected worldwide, globally. It has been really recognized, that initiative. So all these initiatives are being taken. So materials are also one thing, important thing. Awareness, very important. There's already a lot of awareness campaigns are going on. Cyclist pedestrian campaign, red light dim campaign, shaded pedestrian footpath, car-free zones, car-free day. I mean, car-free day. 21st of February was the last car-free day, which happened in Dubai. So these initiatives are not limited in Dubai. I was in Riyadh the other day. Riyadh is also going to have a car-free day, a public transport day. So every city in Middle East is developing that kind of scenario, so that an awareness of sustainability is developed. So then what I have done is I have tried to summarize that what is the impact, and this summarization is based on our experience in Middle East, our experience in Dubai, and the transport model which we have. So in terms of sustainability, 30%, if we reach 30% by 2030, such 30% of carbon emission will be reduced by public transport. There is a room of optimization of carbon emissions by almost about 20% by doing a good land use planning, I think, which is very critical. And that is why I always say urban planners and architects and transport planners and engineers, they need to come together, because there is a big room where we can optimize the land use and don't repeat the Sharjah experience. And if we don't repeat that, we have residential on one side and offices on the other side. We should try to create a mixed kind of communities. 10% by doing good local road and integrated network planning, 5% by access and parking planning, and by use of sustainable material is 5%. So if I combine them together, this is 70% already. So by doing all these things, I'm just using 30% from public transport. The remaining 40% is coming from different solutions which I have just mentioned, and I'm not even adding the future technologies. So if I add future technologies at the top of that, the reduced carbon emission in Middle East or in Dubai can go up to 70% plus by 2030 scenarios by using all these different approaches. So I think that's pretty much from my side. My presentation is done. I will be more than happy to answer any question which you might have. Please, back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadeem, for the very interesting presentation. Personally, I really liked it because it actually summarized the whole situation about transportation here in Dubai. So thanks again. So any questions from the audience here? Any questions? Okay, until we have any questions from the audience, I have. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, that was a good presentation. You mentioned the car ownership in Dubai. Do you have any statistics somewhere else, like in Riyadh, the same situation?
We can find, it's very difficult to find the statistics because a lot of these cities, they really don't publish or reveal these kind of statistics. For Dubai, the published statistics back in 2015 was about 540 cars, and which has grown by 3.6.5%, so that's why we say it's about 600 cars. We can try to find it out, but I don't have that statistics with me now. Right away.
Any other questions here?
Any more questions?
Mr. Nadeem, I have a question for
Yeah,
my
please.
own, if you allow me. When you talk about public transportation, you are talking about limited supply. Like you are talking about that the supply is not enough and we need to increase it later on. Okay?
Yeah.
How about the demand? Is there enough demand? Is there enough ridership for the existing supply, or we also need to encourage people to use public transportation? I mean, is the problem is only with the supply, or it's also with the demand as well?
Okay. I think that's a very good question, and I would like to answer that. I mean, if you know, the current ridership on the Red Line metro, the peak hour ridership is about 23,000 people riding the metro during the peak hour. All of us know that the metro has got a capacity of 19,000 people during the peak hour. That means our current public transport is already congested. That indicates that there is a demand. And again, demand cannot come if you don't have a supply. Demand will only is an induced effect. When you put a supply only, then demand will come. This was something which happened in the past. People thought that we will do the Salik gate, we will put more Salik and public transport will increase. It will not increase if there is no supply. That's why put the supply and then put the penalties and see the initiatives. You cannot really just have the initiative without putting the supply. That is why with all these expansions which is coming up, Dubai has announced 2 expansions for the Red Line. One to the Red Line is being expanded to the Expo 1, then one Red Line extension is being happened to the Middle City Center. With this extension and with the extension of Green Line is also supposed to be extended from Jeddah all the way to the international city. With this extension, you will see the impact. The impact, you cannot really see the impact if you don't put the supply. There is a demand which is very clear now, because once the Red Line came in, this was a difficult question at that time. Will this Red Line will suffice? Will this have enough demand? 19,000 is the capacity which, as a consultant, everyone planned for. The current ridership of Red Line is 23,000 PHPGT, which means we have already exceeded the demand. We have already exceeded the kind of capacity, which indicates there is a potential requirement for the more supply in the future.
Yeah, but this is for the metro. How about for the buses? Is it the same story for the buses as well?
Okay, that's the thing. I think let's not mix metros and buses together, because metro and buses should be operating in a different environment. Metro and buses, they should never compete with each other. I mean, if you go in the Western world, metro are public transport carriers for the long distance trips, and buses are more about the feeder system to provide connectivity to the metro station. The problem over here in this region is, since we really don't have a comprehensive metro coverage, so basically we are using buses to supplement that. Okay, but they should not be doing that, and that's why our plan for the future is having a full comprehensive metro network, and buses should not be running on the strategic corridor. Buses should only be feeding to these metro stations. So now, I mean, your question is correct that is there enough demand? There is demand. I mean, we already have 1,500 buses now. Once this Expo event was announced, the question was, can we use these some of these buses, out of these 1,500 buses? And we went back to RT and we asked them, can we use it? And the answer was no. Our buses are fully operational. I mean, we don't really have any spare buses. So that answers your question. There are no really spare capacity left on RTA's bus system. That's why RTA is going to buy more buses for the future. That means there is a demand. Thanks.
Regarding the carpooling, I just needed to explain it a little bit because I somehow missed it.
No, exactly. I mean, as I told that, even that was something new for me. My colleague told me there is an application called Sharekni. Okay, so that, and I investigated it only yesterday that how it works. In that application, you can go. It's an application by Road and Transport Authority. If you go into the application, you have to open your account, and after you open that account, you can tell that on that application that what route you want to travel, say from World Trade Center to Jabal Ali, and then someone else will also tell what route he is traveling. Then that application will help you, and it will prompt you that there are 2-3 persons and these are the potential carpooling options. This is how it works. So
Is there a charge for it, or is it just
I'm not
partnership
sure.
only?
I'm not sure. That's why, I mean, if you go sharekni.com, you can see exactly how. I have never used it. It was new to me also. I mean, I have spoken about carpooling for a long time, but I was never sure that Dubai already has got that application. So it was very interesting for me as well.
I think so. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
If I can comment on this, actually, car sharing and carpooling are now getting more and more common in Canada and United States, and there are similar apps and similar websites in both United States and Canada, where if you want to travel somewhere, you just input your destination. I want to go somewhere, and someone else is traveling with his car, so you share the ride and you agree on the terms of sharing the ride. You either pay him some share of the cost of the trip, or you plan, once you use your own car and once he uses his own car, so that you keep switching from one car to the other. Okay. And actually, the governments, this is another interesting area that maybe also here in Dubai, we can also encourage carpooling by designating lanes for shared cars only, like for cars that have more than one passenger. Okay, this is HOV lanes, like high occupancy vehicle lanes. This is another interesting idea that you may explore as well.
That's true. I mean, these ideas are being studied, and HOV is a very hot topic these days. So it's a good one. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah.
I'm Mazhar from Qatar. I have two questions for you.
Yes, please.
One is, do you have the statistics on what is the current road capacities of Dubai or UAE, and what are the future forecasts?
Okay, can you just speak a bit, yeah?
Hi, what I want to know is, what is the current capacity of the roads or roadworks, primary and secondary, and what are the future planned roads that's coming up in the entire UAE or GCC? That's question number one. Number two is, you briefly spoke about private-public partnership. What are the current plans, or what are the current future initiatives that the government is taking to bring private enterprise into the public place?
Okay. To answer to your first question is, do we have the statistics for current road capacities and network and the future road capacities and the network? Yeah, we do have statistics. We are developing Dubai's transport model, and that model, it captures all these statistical information, that what is the current road network in terms of kilometers and all those. I don't have that in front of me now, but I can share that information. Future, we have developed a 2030, 2020 plans. We cannot really share that information to you because that plan is still not released by RTA, but we have got that information as well. So yeah, we have that information. That information, if you want for current, definitely we can share. We don't have any issues because everyone knows it's all revealed, that how many kilometers of strategic road network collector. It's by category by category. I can tell you that Sheikh Zayed Road, what is the length, what is the V by C ratio of Sheikh Zayed Road in different tower. For each and every road we can have got that information, even for local and collector roads, but not for other cities. We have got information for Jeddah also, because we are doing the transport model update for Jeddah. But Qatar, no. Qatar should already have that from the transport model. They already have a transport model, but it's an old one, this L40 model, I think.
We are working with Ashkal now.
Yeah, you guys are working with Ashkal, so they must have that. So Dubai, we have information. For Jeddah, we have got that information. Current for future should not be a problem. Your second question was PPP. Okay. PPP, there is already a committee by the way, my colleague Khalaf is over here. He was with RTA till last 2 months back and he was part of the PPP committee in RTA. Okay. There is already a committee within Roads and Transport Authority which is called Business Development Department. They look into all these kind of matters. They have investigated several alternatives to implement PPP. The one which I know is, which AURECON is working on, is truck rest areas in Dubai. So that is also a kind of PPP model where public and private partnership will happen. So RTA is looking for investor in that particular thing. The other one which I'm aware of is the new multi-storage car park happening around the Dera Court area. That is also going out for tender on the PPP model. In the region, I have done the transport master plan for the Sharjah Airport. Sharjah Airport Authority is looking for investors to do the PPP model aspect in that. So there is a lot of work going on. Every authority, every department, they have got a department which is looking into the PPP stuff. So yeah, there's a lot going on over there. Any more questions? I'm happy to take more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now let's move to the next person.